They call me Father Alaric. Not Alaric as in a given name, but a title, a designation. It's a formality, a quiet acknowledgement of the endless role I've inherited, one that few understand and even fewer survive. The name itself, Alaric, is an ancient one, a Visigothic king who sacked Rome. A grim irony, perhaps, that a man charged with defending the spiritual integrity of this eternal city should bear the name of its historical destroyer. I often wonder if this was intentional, a subtle reminder from the higher echelons of the Curia that even within the Church, destruction is an ever-present force. I'm a priest, yes, but not the kind who hears confessions in sunlit booths or blesses fields. My parish is carved from the very bowels of the earth, deep beneath the eternal city, a place where the light of God, if it ever truly reached, has long since flickered and died, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding shadow of human depravity and demonic malevolence. I am an archivist, a keeper of shadows, a priest for the Vatican's Exorcism archive. This isn't merely a repository of forgotten texts. It is a spiritual bulwark, a containment facility, a silent battlefield where the eternal war between light and darkness is meticulously documented, cataloged, and, at great cost, fought. And before you ask, no, it's not just dusty scrolls and ancient rites. It's alive, it breathes, it plots, and sometimes it screams, its agony and its hunger echoing through the very stones. It is a vast, sentient prison for the damned, and I am one of its reluctant, terrified wardens. My days, or what passes for them in the perpetual twilight of this place, are spent in the Scriptoria Infernalis, a labyrinth of forgotten chambers sealed centuries ago by men driven mad by what they witnessed, men whose final act was to enter their own sanity within these walls to protect the world outside. The very air here is thick, heavy, a palpable presence, saturated with the scent of old parchment, ozone from arcane discharges, and something else, something acrid and metallic, like dried blood and fear, a pervasive, sickening sweetness that speaks of decay and corruption. The architecture itself seems to writhe, ancient Roman foundations twisted by later, more sinister additions, the very stone imbued with the spiritual residue of centuries of profane rituals and desperate prayers. Arches made of rough-hewn basalt give way to sections lined with polished obsidian, reflecting not light, but the profound absence of it. The shelves stretch into an oppressive, impenetrable darkness, vanishing into an abyss only partially illuminated by the faint flickering light of our sacred candles. These shelves are laden with untold thousands of tomes, each one a relic of unimaginable horror bound in materials that mock human form. Dried human skin, flayed dermis from creatures unknown, calcified bone, sinew, and sometimes, sickeningly, materials that still seem to pulse faintly with an unnatural life. Each volume is etched with symbols no sane hand should ever touch, glyphs that shift and shimmer at the edge of peripheral vision, threatening to unravel the mind. Each volume is a record of a soul lost, a battle fought, a victory, or more often a devastating defeat against ein shrine in stains. Each stained the encroaching darkness. Every entry, every faded script, every intricate illustration is a testament to suffering, a whisper of a name best left unspoken, a chilling echo of a past trauma that never truly dies. It is a library of damnation, a mausoleum for the sanity of mankind, and I am its librarian, cursed with the knowledge of its contents. My appointment came after years of study, of relentless prayer, of proving an unwavering faith against the creeping doubt that gnaws at all who delve into the truly profane. They observed me, tested me, pushed me to the brink. I had served in various capacities within the church, always drawn to the margins, to the forgotten corners where faith was most fiercely challenged. My theological background was extensive. My understanding of demonology, though academic at the time, was robust. But more than intellect or piety, they saw something else in me, I suppose, a peculiar resilience, a singular capacity for stoicism in the face of the unholy, a particular kind of quiet madness that made me suitable for this unique brand of sacrifice. They didn't tell me everything, not at first. The initial briefing spoke of duty, of spiritual warfare, of the unwavering defense of humanity's soul against encroaching malevolence. They spoke of the glory of God and the ultimate triumph of light. They didn't mention the cold that never leaves your bones, a chill that permeates flesh and spirit, or the whispers that echo in the empty spaces of your mind, promising oblivion, or the nightmares that are not mere figments of slumber but actual intrusions from entities striving to breach your consciousness. And they certainly didn't fully explain the rules. Oh, the rules. There are 9 of them, 9 deadly rules etched into the very fabric of my existence here, hammered into my soul with the force of repeated observation and the chilling, often fatal consequences of their transgression. These aren't guidelines. They are absolute spiritual laws, carefully devised over centuries of trial and error, of sacrifice and despair. They are the only thing that separates us from the horrors we contain, the fragile membrane holding chaos at bay. Break one, even in ignorance or fleeting weakness, and you risk not just your life, not just your sanity, but your eternal salvation, and perhaps the fragile peace of the world outside, unleashing a contagion that could shatter the very foundations of reality. The rules are our armor, our shield, our very breath in this suffocating realm. Rule number 1. Never read beyond the first entry in a new volume. This isn't a suggestion, it's an absolute decree, a fundamental axiom of survival in this place. Each tome, when first acquired from the outside world, often retrieved from sites of unspeakable evil, ancient ruins, or the aftermath of profound spiritual corruption, is placed on a special plinth, a basalt slab inscribed with ancient wards of containment and purification. The first entry, usually a summary of the entity or curse it describes, a general warning or a cataloging marker, is permissible for initial assessment. It provides just enough information for us to understand the general nature of the horror we are housing without directly engaging with its full potency. But to delve deeper, to turn the page, to trace the intricate, often beautiful, yet always malevolent script of successive entries, is to invite the full, unadulterated force of the entity or curse contained within. Each successive entry, each detailed account of its origin, its manifestations, its victims, its rituals, is a thread, a spiritual tether to the darkness it describes. These threads are not merely passive descriptions. They are conduits, energetic pathways that the entity can use to perceive, influence, and eventually ensnare the unwary reader. To follow these threads is to walk directly into the snare, to offer your mind and soul as a fresh canvas for its insidious artistry. My predecessor, Father Thomas, a man whose quiet piety and profound intellect I deeply admired, ignored this rule. He was a scholar of immense dedication, a man who believed that understanding, even of the darkest evils, was paramount to combating them. He believed his faith was strong enough, his intellect keen enough to comprehend, to rationalize, to categorize without succumbing. He chose a particularly ornate volume, one bound in what looked suspiciously like flayed human flesh, its texture disturbingly smooth yet scarred, its edges stiff and cold. The title scorched onto the spine in a script that seemed to writhe and shift as you focused on it, spoke of a primordial sorrow, a grief so profound it could unravel the very fabric of existence. He read past the first page, his brow furrowed in concentration, then the second, his lips moving silently, then the third, his eyes widening with each line. We found him hours later, slumped over the lectern, his body cold and stiff, yet his flesh still alarmingly pliant to the touch. His eyes were wide and vacant, fixed on the unseen ceiling above, reflecting only the dim candlelight, devoid of any spark of recognition or life. His mouth was open in a silent, eternal scream, stretched unnaturally wide, as if trying to expel something that could not be voiced. and from his throat a faint, nauseating melody emerged, a sound that could curdle blood and sour milk, a high-pitched, almost imperceptible hum that resonated in the very bones of anyone who heard it. It was not music, but an anti-music, a vibration of pure, agonizing despair. His soul was gone, utterly consumed, replaced by that terrible song, the resonant frequency of the entity itself, now inhabiting his vacated shell. We had to entomb him within the archive itself, deep in a specially warded crypt, for fear of what might happen if his body, now a vessel for that unholy hum, was brought into the light of the world, potentially unleashing the sonic contagion upon the unsuspecting populace. His remains were consecrated in a desperate ritual, then sealed behind layers of blessed lead and stone. Now, whenever I pass that specific section of the grimoire wing, I can still hear it, a low, persistent vibration that seems to thrum beneath the stone floors, a subtle, sickening pressure against my eardrums, a constant, chilling reminder of the perils of unchecked curiosity and the absolute finality of rule number 1. It is the archive's internal dirge, a mournful echo of a soul consumed. Rule number 2. Always wear the blessed silver crucifix, even in sleep. This one seems deceptively simple, almost pedestrian in its instruction, a basic tenet of religious protection, yet its significance here is paramount, its absence utterly catastrophic. Not just any crucifix, mind you, but one consecrated in the deepest, most ancient crypts of St. Peter's Basilica, imbued with millennia of prayers, countless blessings, and specific forgotten rituals passed down through generations of those who understand the true nature of spiritual warfare. It's more than a symbol. It's a living shield, a constant, radiant reminder of the light in this place of perpetual shadow, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Its very presence acts as a spiritual irritant to the entities contained within the archive, a repelling force that keeps them from gaining purchase. I've known men, hardened men of immense faith and intellect, who scoffed at such superstitions, viewing them as unnecessary crutches for the less spiritually robust. Archivist Luca, a brilliant but stubbornly pragmatic scholar from Milan, a man who preferred logic to lore, removed his during one of his brief, fitful naps in the designated safe alcoves. These alcoves, while warded, are only truly safe with the additional protection of the crucifix. He believed he was simply resting, easing the pressure of the cool metal against his skin. He awoke to find his small, Spartan room filled with a pervasive, cloying sweetness, like rotting lilies, a perfume both alluring and profoundly disturbing. He thought little of it, attributing it to fatigue, perhaps a lingering scent from a distant ritual, or simply a trick of the ancient air. But the sweetness never left. It clung to him, grew stronger each day, infusing his robes, his skin, his very breath. We could smell him coming before we saw him, a sweet, sickly aroma that turned stomachs and sent shivers down spines. His skin began to take on a pallor, then a frightening translucence, like ancient wax stretched thin over bone. His teeth elongated, sharpening into points, not overtly demonic, but subtly, chillingly wrong. His eyes, once warm brown and alive with academic curiosity, turned a sickly yellow, like jaundiced parchment, and began to reflect light in an unnatural, predatory way. He began to crave raw meat, consuming it with a feral intensity that shocked us. Then, when that was insufficient, he craved the blood of small animals, finding ways to lure rats and vermin into his alcove. We contained him, of course, a desperate, brutal affair that none of us wished to recall. He was still Luca, in his mind, his voice still pleading for understanding, for help, but his body was no longer his own, host to something ancient and rapacious, an unseen parasitic entity that used the scent of false beauty as its lure. slowly consuming him from the inside out, preparing him for a final, monstrous transformation. He was eventually sealed in a containment crypt, his mournful, animalistic howls echoing for days. The crucifix, small as it is, acts as a constant ward, a spiritual beacon that repels the insidious, often subtle corruption that seeks to seep into every fiber of our being in this place. I cling to mine like a drowning man to driftwood, even as its cool metal seems to burn against my chest, a constant, comforting pressure, a vital reminder of the invisible barrier it provides. Sometimes, when the archive breathes its deepest, the silver feels as though it vibrates, a low, buzzing hum against my skin, alerting me to unseen dangers, a constant conversation between sacred metal and ambient malevolence. Rule number 3. Never speak the full name of an entity. This is a fundamental, ancient truth in the esoteric traditions, understood instinctively by anyone who has even brushed against the veil of the unseen. Names hold power, profound and terrifying power. A true name is more than a label. It is a key, an invitation, a binding contract, a direct line of communication, a point of spiritual entry. Here, where every volume is essentially a ledger of names and their associated horrors, this rule is a constant mental discipline, a rigorous exercise in linguistic self-control. We learn to refer to them by their catalog numbers, by euphemisms, by descriptive titles that hint at their nature but never fully articulate it. The shadow of Cadiz, the whispering worm, subject row 427, or even just the entity described in Codex Maleficarum 3.7. Never under any circumstance by what they truly are, by the sound that unlocks their essence. I recall a young novice, Brother Paolo, fresh-faced and full of righteous zeal, barely out of the seminary. His faith was unshakable, his heart pure, but his understanding of the archive's true dangers was tragically naive. He was assisting me with a retrieval, a particularly dense, leather-bound manuscript describing a minor, yet persistent, earthbound spirit that caused localized outbreaks of madness, a low-level entity usually contained by simple wards. As he carefully pulled the heavy tome from its resting place, a faint, ethereal moan seemed to emanate from the ancient pages, a sound filled with an almost human sadness. Paolo, in his profound innocence and misguided sense of pastoral duty, felt a surge of pity, perhaps, or a desire to acknowledge the suffering within. He looked at the first page, which bore the spirit's true appellation, in elegant yet unsettling script, a flowing cursive that seemed to coil like a serpent. He murmured it aloud, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, barely a whisper. Lysandra. Nothing happened immediately. The book was shelved. The day continued with its usual grim routine. We dismissed the sound, the faint feeling of unease, as mere fatigue. But that night, as we slept in our cells, the silence of the archive was shattered by a cacophony. Not screams of terror, but laughter. Insidious, mocking, derisive laughter that seemed to come from the very stones of the archive, vibrating through the floors and walls, seeping into the very marrow of our bones. It started subtly, a distant titter, a single, cruel chuckle, then grew, swelling into a wave of hysterical, derisive mirth that echoed and re-echoed through the subterranean chambers. Every single one of us, from the most junior novice to the stoic Father Malachi, was affected. We found ourselves laughing uncontrollably, tears streaming down our faces, our diaphragms aching with the force of it. It was not joy, not amusement, but a hollow, agonizing mockery of it, a forced, maddening hilarity that preyed on our deepest vulnerabilities, our sanity frayed with each passing moment, our minds teetering on the brink of collapse, desperately trying to stop the agonizing paroxysms of mirth. It took Father Malachi, the head archivist, a man whose grim resolve borders on inhuman and whose spiritual fortitude is legendary, nearly an hour to quell the entity. He used a series of ancient, forgotten invocations, his voice hoarse with effort, his face contorted in agony, his own laughter mingling sickeningly with the demonic chorus. When the laughter finally receded, leaving behind an echoing silence more terrifying than the noise, Paolo was found catatonic in his cell, his mouth frozen in a silent, agonizing laugh, his eyes wide and unseeing, staring into an abyss of internal madness. He never recovered, remaining in a specialized facility, his internal monologue a constant stream of silent, cruel jokes. The entity, Lysandra, continues to reside within the archive, now known colloquially, and, with a shudder, as the Giggler, its presence marked by the occasional faint echo of its cruel mirth, a subtle pressure on the mind that tempts one to smile, then to laugh, then to descend into an uncontrollable, self-destructive hysteria. Its power, its ability to psychologically torture and shatter our minds, was unleashed by a single spoken name, a testament to the terrible, destructive potency of identity in this realm of the damned. We are ever vigilant, our lips sealed against the lure of forbidden words, our minds constantly reinforcing the mental barriers against the sound of a name. Rule number 4. The candles must never go out. The Scriptoria Infernalis, being 70 feet below the surface of the earth, is illuminated solely by countless candles, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, flickering in brass sconces on heavy oak tables and suspended from intricate iron chandeliers. These flames are not merely for light, though they provide our only visual reference in this oppressive gloom. They are active, living barriers, miniature hearths of divine light. Each flame, however small, is consecrated, a consecrated beacon against the true, consuming darkness that would otherwise overwhelm this place, a darkness both physical and spiritual, a void hungry for existence. Every wick, every drop of wax, every particle of smoke is part of an intricate warding system. We have a rota, a precise, unyielding schedule for maintenance and replacement, an unbroken chain of vigil stretching back centuries. Every archivist, regardless of rank or seniority, participates in this sacred duty, checking, replacing, and relighting with utmost solemnity. One night, during a sudden, violent tremor, something not uncommon in this ancient city, which rests on layers of geological fault lines, but particularly unsettling when you're 70 feet underground and the very earth groans around you, a rack of candles, precariously balanced on an ancient iron-wrought stand, was overturned. Before anyone could react, before hands could dart out, or consecrated oil could be brought to relight them, the flames were extinguished, plunging a significant section of the archive into complete and utter blackness. It lasted for only a few seconds, perhaps 10 at most. An eternity of chilling silence before others rushed in with lanterns, their own faces pale with dread. But in those 10 seconds, the air changed irrevocably. The familiar metallic tang of the archive, the scent of ozone and ancient parchment, was replaced by the overpowering stench of stale blood and something else, something cloyingly sweet and putrid, like decay and spoiled offerings. From the profound, consuming darkness, we heard it, a wet, slithering sound, a viscous dragging, followed by a single, choked gurgle, a sound that ended too abruptly, too completely. When the light returned, casting long, dancing shadows, Brother Dominic, who had been in that section, diligently cross-referencing ancient texts on infernal taxonomy, was gone. Not a trace remained. No body, no tattered piece of his robe, no crucifix, no dropped quill. Only a faint, glistening trail on the flagstones, like mucus or ectoplasmic slime, leading directly towards an ancient, sealed crypt we had always believed to be empty, an architectural anomaly. We searched, of course, for days, then weeks, despite the inherent danger, but found nothing, no sign of his struggle, no physical remnant, just that sickening scent which lingered for weeks, a ghost of his final terrifying moments. The archives, you see, are not just a collection of books. They are a living membrane, a thin skin stretched over an abyss. And if the light falters, even for an instant, the things that lurk on the other side, the entities contained within the volumes, the ones that hunger for flesh, for souls, for existence beyond their textual prison, can breach that membrane. The candles are our constant vigil, our fragile line against utter annihilation, a spiritual firewall. I have grown to dread the sound of a candle sputtering, the brief hiss of melting wax, the sudden sharp scent of smoke that precedes a total loss of light. It sends a primal, visceral fear through me, a chilling reminder of Dominic's fate, swallowed whole by the briefest flicker of darkness. Each flame is a silent prayer, a defiant act against the consuming void, and the weight of keeping them lit is a burden that never truly leaves us. Rule number 5. Report any anomaly, no matter how minor, immediately. This rule is about vigilance, about the meticulous, almost obsessive, tracking of even the most subtle incursions, for in this place, subtlety is often the most dangerous weapon. A misplaced book by an inch, a faint, unfamiliar aroma that wasn't there minutes before, a sudden drop in temperature in a specific corner, a shadow that moves when no one is watching, a faint echo that doesn't belong, all are potential signs of a breach, a manifestation, a shift in the delicate, precarious balance we strive to maintain. We are not just librarians, we are sentinels, spiritual radar dishes, constantly attuned to the subtle shifts in the archive's spiritual ecosystem. I remember a time when I almost failed this rule myself. A moment of complacency that could have had catastrophic consequences. I was cataloging a collection of particularly disturbing medieval grimoires from the Low Countries, each one a testament to human cruelty and spiritual folly, filled with grotesque illustrations and chilling incantations. As I carefully placed one on the shelf, an innocuous-looking but profoundly ancient volume bound in dark, crumbling leather, I noticed a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the air, like the distant hum of a forgotten, colossal machine. It was so subtle, so easily dismissed as my own fatigue or the ambient noises of the ancient structure, that I almost ignored it. My mind, ever seeking rational explanation, searched for mundane causes, an underground train, a distant construction project somewhere in the city above. But something nagged at me, a cold prickle at the base of my spine. It wasn't a physical vibration. Not truly. It was a feeling of vibration, an internal resonance that seemed to emanate directly from the book itself, a psychic hum that bypassed my ears and resonated directly within my bones. Despite the voice of doubt, the years of training kicked in. I reported it to Father Malachi, describing the sensation in as much detail as I could, feeling foolish for bringing such a vague, subjective observation to him. He listened intently, his expression unreadable as always, his ancient eyes piercing. He then instructed me to retrieve the book again, but this time to use the consecrated tongs from the sacred alcove, tools specifically blessed for handling volatile materials. As I did so, carefully gripping the book with the gleaming, silver-tipped tongs, he recited a series of guttural incantations in a forgotten dialect of Aramaic, his voice deep and resonant, filling the chamber with unexpected power. When I touched the book with the tongs, a faint, violet light sparked from its spine like static electricity, and the air around it shimmered like heat haze above an asphalt road, distorting the shelves behind it. Malachi explained that the entity contained within had been attempting a subtle resonance, a psychic vibration, a slow, insidious attunement to the physical realm. It was a form of spiritual tuning fork, trying to match its frequency with ours, to gain purchase, to begin its slow, insidious escape, to find a weakness in the wards, a crack in the spiritual barrier. My report, however minor the anomaly seemed, had allowed them to catch it before it could fully manifest, before it could solidify its connection to our dimension. Had I waited, had I dismissed it as imagination, the entity might have gained enough strength to affect those who walked past it, slowly twisting their minds, poisoning their spirits, driving them to acts of self-destruction or madness, preparing them as conduits for its full emergence. This archive is a place where the smallest disturbance, the most fleeting whisper, the most subtle shift in ambient energy can escalate into catastrophe. We are always on the edge, always monitoring, always reporting, because the unseen is often the most dangerous and the most persistent threat, ceaselessly probing our defenses. The responsibility of this constant, internal surveillance is a heavy one, and it grinds away at the nerves, ensuring a perpetual state of heightened, anxious awareness that never truly recedes. Rule number 6, never touch the bindings without consecrated gloves. The bindings of these volumes are not merely covers. They are conduits, living membranes, often crafted from skin, bone, sinew, sometimes even preserved organic tissue from grotesque beings, or, most disturbingly, from human remains, all preserved and imbued with dark energies through dark arts and profane rituals. They are porous, absorbent, imbued with the spiritual residue of the horrors they contain, saturated with the very essence of the entities trapped within. The consecrated gloves, made of specially treated leather, often from unblemished calfskin and embroidered with intricate protective sigils in silver thread, are our only defense against direct spiritual contamination. They create a vital insulating barrier, a spiritual circuit breaker, preventing the direct transfer of corrupting energy. I once witnessed the devastating consequences of forgetting this rule, a memory that still makes my hands ache with phantom cold. A new archivist, Brother Julian, a bright-eyed young man with an unfortunate streak of intellectual curiosity that bordered on recklessness, was tasked with reorganizing a section of forgotten texts in a rarely disturbed alcove. He was meticulous, dedicated, eager to prove his worth, but also, in his zeal, somewhat impatient with what he perceived as unnecessary precautions. He removed his gloves, believing them cumbersome, to get a better feel for an ancient scroll he was trying to unroll, a document that promised forbidden insights into geomancy. The scroll was bound in what looked like dried intestine, mottled and dark, with a sickeningly smooth, almost oily texture. He touched it directly with his bare hand, his fingers tracing the grotesque pattern. Nothing happened immediately, of course. The insidious nature of this place is its subtlety, its patience. But over the next few days, Julian's hand began to change in ways that were both horrifying and profoundly unnatural. First, a slight discoloration appeared, a faint purple bruise that refused to fade, deepening over time into an angry, bruised black. Then the skin started to flake, to peel away in thin, translucent strips, like shedding serpent skin. Beneath it, the flesh was not healthy pink, but a mottled gray, crisscrossed with tiny pulsing veins that seemed to shift and writhe beneath the surface, as if an unseen network of parasitic worms had taken root. He complained of a constant itching, then a burning sensation, then an unbearable, bone-deep cold that permeated his entire arm. Regardless of the ambient temperature, he tried to hide it, wrapping his hand in bandages, wearing oversized sleeves, but the stench eventually gave him away, a sweet, putrid odor, like meat left too long in the sun, slowly decaying, yet never fully decomposing. When Father Malachi finally intervened, his face etched with grim resignation, Julian's hand was a grotesque parody of itself, the flesh dissolving, the bones beneath exposed and blackened, corroded by an internal unholy acid. and from the exposed bone, tendrils of black mold, intelligent and malevolent, began to sprout, thick and fibrous, pulsing faintly. His entire arm had become a conduit, a doorway for whatever festered within that ancient scroll, a living extension of its corrupting influence. There was nothing to be done, no prayer strong enough, no exorcism potent enough to reverse the profound spiritual decay. We were forced to amputate, a horrifying, desperate measure taken in the deepest, most warded part of the archive, a ritual of surgical purgation performed by the archivist medics, their faces pale with revulsion and grim necessity. Even then, the corruption lingered, clinging to him like a shroud, subtly poisoning his remaining flesh. Julian was sent away to a remote, heavily consecrated monastery high in the Alps, isolated from all human contact, but I heard whispers that the corruption eventually spread, slowly consuming him entirely, transforming him into something unrecognizable, something that now writhes in the perpetual shadows of that secluded cloister, a living embodiment of the scroll's malevolence. I now wear my gloves constantly, a second skin, a constant, physical, and spiritual barrier between my flesh and the insidious, hungry horrors that line these shelves, each touch a potential dance with damnation. The sensation of the leather against my skin is a constant, subtle reminder of the profound vulnerability of flesh in this unholy place. Rule number 7. Do not make eye contact with the reflections in the archival glass. Many of the more dangerous volumes, particularly those containing primordial entities or curses of immense power, are kept behind thick, enchanted glass, designed not just for physical protection but to contain their insidious, radiating influence. These glass panels, polished to a mirror sheen by generations of archivists, reflect the dim candlelight and the figures moving within the archive, creating a distorted, dreamlike panorama of our somber existence. But these reflections are not always true. They are susceptible to manipulation. Sometimes, the entities within the texts, drawing on some sliver of residual power or simply their innate capacity for deception, project distorted images, twisted visages that mimic the unwary viewer, or worse, show them visions of their deepest fears or most forbidden desires. To make eye contact, even for a fleeting moment, to acknowledge these false reflections, is to acknowledge them, to invite them into your mental space, to open a direct channel for their malevolent influence to seep into your mind, your very soul. I've seen what happens, the chilling transformation that begins with a simple glance. Archivist Sister Agnes, a woman renowned for her sharp intellect, her unwavering focus, and her profound understanding of ancient languages, was diligently cross-referencing a series of obscure demonic pacts. She was meticulous, perhaps too much so, immersing herself completely in the disturbing texts. She spent hours before one particular glass case, her gaze fixed on the intricate swirling script of the binding, trying to discern a pattern, a hidden code. I saw her glance up, caught by some faint, almost imperceptible movement in the periphery of her vision, a shimmer of light on the glass. Her eyes, intelligent and vibrant, met her reflection in the glass. But it wasn't her reflection. It was something else entirely. Her face, yes, but subtly wrong, a grotesque caricature of her features. The eyes were too wide, too black, utterly devoid of humanity, the smile too thin, too predatory, too knowing. It lasted only an instant, a flicker, a brief aberration in the glass. But it was enough. Agnes stiffened. Her breathing became shallow, imperceptible. She didn't scream, didn't even move, frozen in a silent tableau of horror. But when she finally turned away from the glass, her own eyes were no longer the vibrant, intelligent blue I remembered. They were dull, lifeless, like chipped obsidian, reflecting nothing, seeing everything and nothing all at once. From that day on, Agnes never spoke again. Her voice, once clear and articulate, was silenced, as if her vocal cords had been severed by an unseen blade. She moved with a strange, unnatural stiffness, her head cocked at an odd angle, as if listening intently to voices only she could hear, to a symphony of madness. Her work became erratic, her once precise handwriting devolving into jagged, nonsensical scribbles that seemed to whisper of despair, chaos, and a profound cosmic indifference. We tried everything: elaborate exorcisms, blessed oils, prolonged prayer vigils, even consulting outside experts, but nothing worked. It was as if her soul had been scraped clean, leaving behind an empty vessel, a hollow shell, a puppet animated by some unseen, malevolent force, its strings pulled by the distorted reflection she had seen. She eventually withered away, not from any physical ailment, but from a profound internal emptiness, her body slowly giving out as her spirit had already done, leaving behind a husk. Now, when I walk these halls, my gaze is always directed downwards, or at the sturdy spines of the books themselves, never at the shimmering, deceptive surfaces of the archival glass. The reflections here are not to be trusted. They are mirrors of madness, windows into the abyss, and once you look, the abyss looks back, and it never truly lets go, embedding a shard of itself within your perception, forever altering your reality. Rule number 8. If you hear a whisper that doesn't belong, pray, do not respond. The archive is never truly silent, not in the way the outside world understands silence. There's the constant, low hum of the ancient ventilation system, forever circulating the stale, chilled air, the creak of settling stone, the groans of the very earth above us, the rustle of our heavy wool robes as we move, the soft scratch of quills on parchment as we meticulously document the unspeakable. But sometimes there are other sounds, whispers, soft, insidious sounds that seem to float on the stagnant, heavy air, murmuring your given name, promising forbidden knowledge, echoing forgotten fears, or, most cruelly, mimicking the voices of loved ones long lost, their tones filled with the tenderness or urgency that once defined them. These are the temptations, the insidious hooks that the entities use to lure the unwary, to penetrate the defenses of the mind, to find purchase in the raw places of grief and longing, to respond, even to acknowledge them with a twitch of the head, a subtle movement of the eye, or a murmured question, is to invite them deeper, to open a direct channel into your consciousness, to grant them permission to enter. Instead, we are taught, through rigorous mental conditioning and brutal spiritual discipline, to pray, silently, fervently, to fill our minds with divine invocation, with the litanies of protection and faith, until the whispers are drowned out by the light of that faith, until the internal fortress of the mind becomes impregnable. I remember one harrowing night during my first year, before the rules were fully ingrained, when the archive was particularly still, the kind of stillness that presses in on you, that feels heavy and watchful, pregnant with unseen presence. I was alone, in a far section, cataloging an ancient collection of pagan curses, the air around me feeling particularly frigid, the hairs on my arms standing on end. Then I heard it. My mother's voice, soft, sweet, calling my given name, Mathieu, a name I hadn't heard spoken aloud since I left home, a name brimming with the warmth of childhood memories. She had been gone for 20 years, a victim of a lingering illness, and the grief still had its teeth in me. My heart leaped, a desperate surge of longing. It was so real, so clear, imbued with all the love and tenderness I remembered, the particular cadence of her voice. My initial instinct, an instinct born of profound grief and desperate longing, was to turn, to respond, to ask her what she needed, how she had come to be here, to fall into her embrace. But then a flicker of memory, a chilling image of a previous archivist, Brother Anton, who had succumbed to similar whispers. his mind fractured into 1,000 pieces, each one reciting a different demonic litany in a multitude of foreign tongues. I closed my eyes, gripped my crucifix so tightly its edges bit into my palm, and began to pray. The Hail Mary, the Our Father, the Credo, the St. Michael prayer, over and over, a desperate, silent scream in the cavern of my mind, a frantic erection of spiritual walls. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, twisting into accusations of abandonment, then terrifying threats against my remaining loved ones, then seductive promises of reunion, of peace, of an end to this crushing solitude, an endless vigil. It felt like an eternity, a battle waged for my very soul, a desperate tug of war for my consciousness. My hands trembled, cold sweat beaded on my brow, and my body shook with the effort of resisting. But I held fast, my faith, however battered, a fragile shield against the onslaught. Gradually, agonizingly, slowly, the whispers receded, fading back into the oppressive silence from which they had emerged, leaving behind only the echo of my racing heart. When I finally dared to open my eyes, the cold had intensified to an unbearable degree, and the faint scent of lilies, that sickening sweetness I now associated with corruption and temptation, hung heavy in the air, a spiritual signature of the entity that had tried to claim me. I knew then, with a chilling certainty, that I had come dangerously close to the precipice, to a fate worse than death. Every time I hear those faint, insidious murmurs now, those fleeting suggestions in the periphery of my mind, I plunge myself into prayer, a desperate, silent battle waged for the very essence of my being, a constant reaffirmation of my identity against the subtle erosion of the archive. For here, a conversation can cost you your soul, or, at the very least, your sanity. Rule number 9. If you find yourself alone when you shouldn't be, run. Do not look back. This is the final rule, the ultimate warning, the one that speaks of utter, irredeemable catastrophe. We work in shifts, always in pairs, sometimes in threes, in the most volatile sections, never truly alone in any section for extended periods. There is safety in numbers, a spiritual buffer provided by shared faith, mutual vigilance, and the collective strength of human presence. If you realize, suddenly, that your assigned partner is no longer there, that the comforting, mundane presence of another human being has utterly vanished, it means something has gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. It means a breach of profound magnitude, a manifestation too powerful to be contained by our everyday wards, an entity or a curse that has managed to twist the very fabric of reality within the archive, erasing one person from existence, or worse, transforming them into something monstrous, something unrecognizable, something that now hunts. To linger, to search, to call out their name, to try and understand, is to invite the same fate, to offer yourself as the next victim. Your only hope is to flee, to reach the heavily warded central chamber, the only truly safe place within this labyrinth, and to sound the alarm, activating the ancient defensive protocols, and you must not look back. Ever. To cast a glance over your shoulder is to acknowledge the chasing horror, to give it an opening, to allow its malevolent gaze to find purchase upon you. I witnessed the terrible, visceral truth of this rule just last month, a memory so fresh and raw it still makes my breath catch in my throat. Archivist Father Matteo, a kind, scholarly man, prone to gentle humor, was working with me in the ancient grimoire wing, a section notoriously unstable, thick with the spiritual residue of centuries of dark pacts, the air heavy with latent energy. We were meticulously inventorying a series of volumes concerning necromantic rituals, carefully cross-referencing their esoteric symbols. I turned my back for a moment, just for a moment, my attention diverted to retrieve a specific ledger from a lower shelf, a process that required me to kneel and block my view of him. When I straightened less than 10 seconds later, Matteo was gone. The space where he had been standing, only a few feet from me, was utterly, terrifyingly empty. Not a sound, not a whisper, not a dropped quill, not even a breath of displaced air. Just nothing. The air grew instantly, profoundly cold, the scent of ozone piercing the air, sharp as a physical blow. My heart seized in my chest, a cold, hard knot of terror. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to call his name, to search, to understand, to rush back to the spot. But the rule, drilled into me for years, asserted itself with an almost physical force, a primal, overriding command that echoed in my mind. Run. Do not look back. It was an agonizing choice, a betrayal of a colleague, a friend, a man I respected, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that to hesitate was to die, or worse, to become one of or thou. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't allow myself even a flicker of a glance over my shoulder, though every instinct shrieked at me to do so, to confirm the horror, to satisfy the morbid curiosity. The sounds that followed me were not human screams, but a wet, tearing sound, like fabric being ripped apart, or flesh, followed by a series of low, guttural growls that seemed to vibrate through the very stone beneath my feet, resonating deep within my chest, a sound of immense predatory satisfaction. I ran until my lungs burned, until the air felt like crushed glass in my throat, until I stumbled, gasping and trembling, into the heavily warded central sanctum, triggering the alarm bells with a desperate slam of my hand against the emergency runic panel. The other archivists, their faces grim, already moving with practiced speed, quickly sealed the section, the heavy iron doors groaning shut with a sickening thud. We never found a trace of Matteo, not a shred of his robe, not his blessed crucifix, not even his spectacles. He was simply gone, absorbed, consumed. And I, Father Alaric, ran. I did not look back, and that act of preservation, that primal, terrifying flight, still haunts my waking thoughts and torments my dreams, a stain on my soul. I wonder sometimes what I would have seen if I had dared to glance back. And the chilling thought lingers, persistent and malignant. Did I leave Matteo to an instant, brutal end, a quick absorption, or to a prolonged, agonizing transformation into something that now watches me from the shadows of that wing, its eyes filled with a twisted parody of his kindness, waiting for the next moment of vulnerability, for the next time I find myself alone? The echo of those growls still reverberates in my memory, a constant reminder of the price of survival. This is my life. A priest of shadows, a custodian of damnation, my cassock perpetually stained with the spiritual dust of ages, my hands calloused by centuries of forgotten evil. My calling here is a constant tightrope walk over an abyss, a perpetual balancing act on the precipice of madness. The archive isn't just a storage facility, it's a living entity, a vast, complex organism that feeds on spiritual contamination, on the whispers of the damned, on the raw agony of lost souls. It draws in the profane, siphons off the concentrated evil of the world, containing it, keeping it from overwhelming humanity, a spiritual filter, a cosmic kidney for the sins of man. We, the archivists, are merely its white blood cells, its immune system, constantly fighting against the internal infections that threaten to consume it, and by extension, the world above, unaware of the silent, desperate battle waged on their behalf. But what happens, I often wonder, in the crushing solitude of these chambers when the immune system fails? What happens when the infections become too numerous, too virulent, too powerful to contain? The Vatican, in its infinite, often inscrutable wisdom, believes this place is a shield, an impregnable fortress. I believe it is a slowly dying beast, gorged on so much wickedness, so much concentrated malevolence, that it has begun to turn in on itself, consuming its own keepers, its own defenses, slowly decaying from within. My faith, once a towering fortress of unwavering conviction, is now a crumbling edifice, constantly assailed by doubt, by the sheer overwhelming weight of the evil I witness every day. How can one believe in an all-loving, omnipotent God when faced with such profound, intractable suffering, when tasked with containing such pure, unadulterated malevolence? Knowing it continues to breed and fester in the world above? The answers here are never comforting, never simple, never a balm for the soul. They are etched in the writhing script of demonic pacts, whispered in the cold, clammy air of forgotten crypts, and screamed in the silent agony of those who have broken the rules. I see the terrible toll it takes on the others who endure this existence. Father Malachi, the head archivist, has eyes that hold the weight of centuries, a gaze that seems to pierce through the physical world into realms of pure, unadulterated horror, having witnessed and contained so much. He rarely speaks, and when he does, his voice is a gravelly whisper, as if his throat has been scraped raw by the things he has seen and heard, the names he has nearly uttered, the unspeakable rituals he has overseen. His hands, though strong and capable, tremble imperceptibly, a constant tremor born not of age, but of perpetual spiritual warfare, the lingering aftershocks of countless battles for souls. He is a living monument to sacrifice and resilience, a man consumed by his duty, hollowed out by the sheer force of evil he confronts. I see myself in him, a grim, terrifying reflection of my own inevitable future, my own slow decay into a hardened, scarred shell of what I once was, my spirit slowly corroding under the constant spiritual bombardment. The archive shapes us, molds us into its own peculiar instruments, its own living records. There are days, or rather, periods of time that I track by the changing of the guard, by the subtle ebb and flow of the archive's spiritual pressure, when the oppressive atmosphere lifts slightly, when the whispers recede to a faint hum, and the air feels momentarily lighter, almost breathable. These are rare and fleeting, like the memory of a pleasant dream, moments of respite that are almost more terrifying for their brevity and the stark contrast they provide. But they are always followed by periods of intense activity, of chilling manifestations, of amplified whispers and subtle breaches, as if the archive itself is breathing, exhaling its corruption in waves, a slow, malevolent respiration. I feel it sometimes, a pervasive sense of being watched, not by one entity, but by countless unseen eyes, millions of malevolent presences, each one a prisoner, yet each one possessing a sliver of consciousness, a fragment of will, all focused on us, their unwitting jailers, their tormentors. They probe, they tempt, they test our defenses, constantly seeking a weakness, a flaw in the intricate tapestry of wards and rules that barely holds them at bay, a crack in our resolve, a moment of doubt. It is a war of attrition, waged in the deepest darkness, a cosmic chess game where the pieces are souls, and the enemy has all the time in the world, an eternity to wait, to plan, to corrupt. The sheer, overwhelming number of these entities, their collective will, is a force that presses in on us, a silent, psychological tormentor. We document everything, an endless, meticulous cataloging of despair, every manifestation, every whisper, every anomaly, every fleeting shift in temperature, every new volume's arrival. These reports, once pristine, now bear the indelible stains of our existence here. Coffee rings, smudges of ancient soot, faint, unidentifiable odors clinging to the parchment, sometimes even traces of blood from some unseen wound. Sometimes, as I pore over these records, tracing the lines of suffering through generations of archivists, I see patterns emerge, subtle currents in the ocean of chaos, a cyclical nature to the manifestations. But the patterns never truly resolve, never reveal a grand design, only an endless, horrifying cycle of despair and corruption, a relentless progression towards ultimate oblivion. It's like staring into a kaleidoscope of suffering, each turn revealing a new, equally horrifying configuration, a fresh permutation of human and spiritual torment. There is no end to the fight, only continued vigilance, a constant, exhausting, soul-grinding battle, and the gnawing question persists, echoing in the cold silence. For how much longer can we hold the line? For how many more generations can humanity maintain this fragile, unseen barrier? My life outside these walls is a fading memory, a dream that recedes further with each passing day. The taste of fresh air, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the vibrant colors of nature, the sound of birdsong, the laughter of children. They are distant echoes, growing fainter and more ethereal with each passing cycle of shifts. My mind has adapted to the perpetual gloom, my eyes to the flickering candlelight, my ears to the chilling silence and the insidious whispers, to the constant drone of unseen malevolence. I am becoming a creature of the archive, a part of its silent, terrible purpose, my senses recalibrated to its unique, horrifying reality. My prayers, once filled with hope and supplication, with heartfelt pleas for guidance and grace, are now litanies of defense, incantations against despair, a desperate clinging to the vestiges of my own soul, a constant battle to remember the light that once guided me. I wonder if I am already lost, if the things I guard against have already woven themselves into the very fabric of my being, slowly, subtly, transforming me into something less than human, something more akin to the entities I catalog, a new species forged in the fires of perpetual dread. Sometimes, when the candlelight is particularly dim, I catch my reflection in the polished, ancient brass binding of a grimoire or the black sheen of an obsidian shelf, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, I don't recognize the gaunt, hollow-eyed man staring back. His eyes hold a flicker of something ancient, something cold and predatory, a profound emptiness that mirrors the abyss. And in that moment, I am starkly reminded of rule number 7, and the chilling thought takes root, burrowing deep into my consciousness. Have I already made eye contact with a reflection that doesn't belong? Is this already a reflection of something else? Something that has claimed me from within, subtly altering my essence, my perception, my very soul? The line between keeper and kept, between ward and captive, seems to blur ever more with each passing day. The archive is growing, always growing. New volumes arrive with unsettling regularity, sometimes brought by grim-faced priests from forgotten, ravaged corners of the world, their faces etched with horror, their stories too terrible to recount. Other times, they manifest mysteriously on the shelves, their arrival heralded by a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature, a pervasive stench of sulfur, or a faint, guttural moan that seems to tear at the very foundations of the building, a birth cry of malevolence. Each new edition means new horrors, new challenges, new risks, new dangers that we must contain and catalog, new threads for the entities to pull. And with each new arrival, the burden on us, the archivists, grows heavier, the pressure more intense, the spiritual strain more profound. We are fewer now than when I first arrived, our ranks thinned by the insidious depredations of this place. Some left, their minds shattered, their spirits broken, exiled to silent monasteries or remote asylums, forever marked by the horrors they witnessed. Others, like Father Thomas and Brother Dominic and Father Matteo, simply vanished into the void, or became the very things they swore to fight, their fates a stark, chilling warning. I am one of the last remaining, a ghost in a tomb of living nightmares, my existence a testament to a desperate, unending struggle. The darkness here is not a metaphor. It is a tangible, consuming force, a spiritual cancer that gnaws at the edges of reality, threatening to metastasize and engulf all creation. And I, Father Alaric, am its unwitting warden, its reluctant priest, clinging to 9 deadly rules, each one a brittle twig between me and the abyss, a fragile barrier against total annihilation. I pray not for salvation anymore, for I believe my own is likely forfeit, but for the strength to endure, for the will to cling to the fragile ember of my humanity, and for the grace to not become another entry in this eternal, unholy archive. For I know, with a chilling certainty that settles deep in my bones, that one day my name, too, will be etched onto a forgotten spine, my story becoming another whisper in the darkness, another warning for those who dare to delve too deep into the heart of evil. And I wonder, in those moments of chilling clarity, if my confession here, these words I now utter, is merely a final, desperate act of defiance, or if it is already the very first entry of my own damned volume, a prelude to my own inevitable absorption into the ever-growing darkness of the Scriptoria Infernalis.